everyone. Good afternoon, Blanca. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Shifa Khalila. I am the host for today's workshop. So, welcome everybody to our workshop, Script Consultancy with Blanca Escoda Agusti. This workshop is held by Europe on Screen 2022 in partnership with EU Consortium and Cineuropa as part of Road to Europe on Screen 2022. For those of you who are in Jakarta, you can attend and other cities, you can attend our offline festival on our selected venues and the online festival through festivalscope.com. Our offline screenings will be held starting from 16 to 30 June 2022, and our online screenings will be available on Festivalscope starting from 20 to 30 June 2022. Not only film screenings, there are also other virtual events such as question and answer session with European film practitioners during the festival in the Film Talks program. For today's workshop, you will be mentored by Blanca Escoda, a scriptwriter based in Barcelona who mainly specializes in feature-length fiction scripts, documentaries, animation, and TV series. In this workshop, Blanca will share her insights with us on script development work, starting from script writing and introduction to script consultancy. Before we start, allow me to explain the functions of this Zoom webinar. Kindly keep in mind that this webinar session is being recorded and is broadcasted live on YouTube at the moment. All participants are muted in order to enable the speakers to speak without interruptions. We also activate the Q&A box where you can type your questions that will be answered during the Q&A part of the webinar. So feel free to ask anything. You can ask Ms. Blanca both in Bahasa Indonesia or in English. And also, this session will be fully conducted in English. Before we start, let's first welcome Europe on Screen 2022 Festival co-directors, Mbak Menina Putri Wismurti and Mas Naufal Yazid to give some remarks.
Thank you, Sifa. I hope that everyone can hear me clearly. Thank you, Blanca Escoda Agusti, for participating in our pre-festival film workshop on the road to Europe on Screen 2022. It's been an honor to have you here to share your knowledge with all the audience here and the participants as well, and also with the support of the EU Consortium and also for Valerio for bringing us together so that we can meet each other. This is such a good opportunity. And I hope that everybody here, all the participants, can really use this moment to gain more knowledge in terms of the script consultancy and the script making as well. So ask anything that you would like to ask to our mentor today while you can. And then after that, next week, I would like to invite all of the participants to also join our festival from the 16th until the 30th of June, be it offline in Jakarta and also other cities, as well as online at the festivalscope.com. Thank you and semangat. Semoga bisa terus belajar. Semangat. I will leave now for Nova Yazid.
Thank you, Putri. Selamat sore, teman-teman semua. Buenos dias, Blanca. Good to see you again. This is the first time we do the workshop, not just talking about script writing, but the script consultancy. Perhaps you may not be familiar yet with the idea of script consultancy, what it involves, what the process is like. So feel free to use this opportunity to ask a lot of questions to Blanca. She is a very experienced mentor in this field, and I'm sure she is more than willing to share her knowledge, her wisdom, and her experience. So make use of this opportunity very well. And as our team said, if you are not comfortable asking questions in English, feel free to bertanya dalam bahasa Indonesia, silakan, then our team will help to translate you. So make use of this opportunity. And once again, thank you, Blanca, for sparing your time.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Menina Putri and Mas Naufal. And now I would like to invite our festival co-directors, Mas Naufal and Mbak Putri, our mentor for this workshop, Blanca Escoda, and all the participants to turn on the camera for the photo session. For all the participants, I remind you to turn on your camera for the photo session because we will begin shortly. Thank you.
Yuk kita foto bareng yuk, rame-rame.
Okay. I will begin the photo session. We will take a photo twice. So 1, 2, 3. Show us your best pose. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Once more, you can pose as stylish as you like. We will take another photo. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Thank you, Siva. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Blanca.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's get started with the workshop. Blanca, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, hello everybody and welcome. Please let me know if you have problems hearing me, okay? And I would put headphones. I'm not gonna use them at the moment. Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. I've never been to Indonesia, but I'm actually dying to come someday. So I hope I can visit at some point in my life. And I hope you can watch a lot of movies in this festival. I enjoy festivals so much. Some of the best times in my life have been in film festivals. You can make so many friends, so many connections, and I hope you can make the most out of it. Today what I want to talk about is this script consulting role, which is a role within the film industry that people don't usually know it exists. I've been to film festivals like Cannes, and people were asking me like, you're a script consultant, what does that mean? No, what do you do? So for some reason, people still don't know this role. And I think it's because we're half inside the industry, but we're also half outside. We don't appear in film credits most of the time. So it's a bit like in the shadow, you know, it's almost as if people wanted to hide this role. And I think now it's starting to be okay for people to be like, yeah, I work with a script consultant. And I feel people don't feel the need to hide it so much as before. Like at least in Spain, I've seen lately two script writers winning really big prizes in Spain and being like, I want to thank this script consultant. You know, so it's not something that people want to hide anymore. It's almost like it's nice to say I work with this script consultant. So I'm happy this is changing. And why I feel it's important, the role of script consulting, it's because you know, you can paint a picture and then try to sell it, and it only takes you to do that work. But with film, there's so many people collaborating in a movie, and there's so much investment, so much money, you know? So there needs to be someone who makes sure that the story is the best that it can be, okay? That you explore the story to the maximum. And it's been proven that to tell an original story and to tell it the best way it can be, and to tell it at the right time, it's not easy. It's very difficult. So there needs to be someone there checking that, you know, that the story is at its best. So the way I want to organize today is first I'm going to talk to you about what I do on a daily basis, okay? Who employs me, what do I do usually every day? And then we're going to talk about what do I look, when I look at a screenplay, what things do I look at, okay? So I think this can be useful to you if you're a writer or a storyteller even, so that you can apply those things into your own work. But also if you work in pre-production and you're looking to work in script development, this will be useful to you, okay? Yeah, so let's start. First, I want to make sure that you know there are other roles within script development. For example, there's people who are script readers or script analysts, and those people simply read screenplays and then they write reports, okay? At the 4 pages report. And then on the other extreme, you have script editors and script doctors. And what they do is they read a screenplay, they find, I would say, find problems within the script, and then they even sometimes rewrite parts of the script. So they actually write. Okay, that doesn't mean they're authors. The authorship remains for the scriptwriter, but they might be like, the second act has all these problems with the main character, and they may actually type some words. Okay, and script consultant, which is what I do, it's somewhere in the middle of these two. What we do is we provide feedback and an in-depth analysis on the story. And I like to describe my job as I help writers write the project that they have in mind. Okay, one thing is what the writer has in their mind, and the other thing is what's on the page. And sometimes it's very different. So I help for what's in their mind to be really communicated on text. Okay, so in a way I help save time, and I also help writers keep objective, because when you've been working on a screenplay for months, maybe even for years, sometimes you lose objectivity. You know, writers sometimes come to me and they're like, I don't have any idea if this screenplay is good anymore, like, you know. And then I try to take them back to see the screenplay objectivity. Script consultants can be employed by production companies because sometimes they want an external point of view. They can also be employed by the script writer. For example, there's a lot of script writers who want to send their script to contests, to film festivals, or to production companies. So they come to me and they're like, can you help me make it better before I send it out? And then I can also work for competitions, for regional film agencies that they are looking to choose the best projects, no, to give an award or to give money to. So then I read a lot of screenplays and I try to help them choose the strongest projects. We tend to provide feedback either by writing. I can write a report, 4 pages report or a 10 pages report, and we go from the most general point of views to really detailed comments on the screenplay. Okay, but that's when we write a written report. It's more of a monologue. It's me saying, this is how I read your story. But I cannot talk to the scriptwriter, so it's a monologue from me to them. Okay. Then I also do face-to-face meetings or online meetings, usually 3 hours long, and that's more of a dialogue with the writer. You know, I can improvise. It's more organic because I have the writer in front of me, so I can ask a lot of questions, and it's really nice. It's a very nice process. Like the other day, I had this meeting with a writer, and I had prepared a lot of notes. And then I arrived there, and talking to her, I realized what she had in mind and what she wanted the screenplay to be was completely different to what I had read. So all my notes were not useful anymore, and I had to improvise. And I had to explain to her why the story read so different to what she had in mind. So it's a really beautiful process, very organic. And then I also do workshops, which is what we're going to do tomorrow. And it's you gather a few different writers, and everybody gives feedback to everybody. And, you know, when you talk about every story, and yeah, and sometimes because you talk, so there's so many feedback from so many people. Sometimes there are these moments of magic when the writer is like, okay, now I understand, now I know what I need to do now. So it's also a very nice process. Some script consultants don't like to write reports. They prefer to do this face-to-face meeting with writers. I don't mind writing reports. I think it's also nice when you don't have the feedback from the writer. And just so that you have an idea, I can read 2 screenplays a week, or I can also, like if I'm working for a competition, I could even read 8 screenplays a week. So just that you have an idea on how many screenplays I can read in a month or in a year. You know, I read a lot of screenplays. Sometimes if I'm on holidays and I haven't read in a month, I get nervous. It's like I need to read another screenplay. You get kind of addicted. Okay, so what I look at when I have a script, I look at the story, okay, and I also look at the writing. It's not the same thing. Sometimes you find a really strong project in terms of the story. It's really powerful, but it's not really well written. Okay, so my job is to see past the maybe non-professional writing and see that behind that there's a really powerful story. And sometimes it's the other way around. I can find, they can give me a story that it's very simple. I've seen it many times before, but it's incredibly well written and the writer has many tools, okay, to write it. So it's not always, it doesn't come together all the time. The best thing is when it's a strong story, really well told, but sometimes it's not. Also, I look at whether the story will connect with today's society, okay? And I also look at if it's making a good representation of minorities or people that are usually marginalized in society, okay? So that there are not so many stereotypes. For example, I might read a screenplay in which there's a disabled person who maybe uses a wheelchair and that's all they do. And I might talk to the writer and say like, hey, can you add something else to this character so that it's not only about this character being in a wheelchair, so that there's more complexity in this character, you know. This is something that I also made it my role as a script consultant, to look at these things. And it's important to notice that my opinion about the story is not important. If you want to be a script consultant, maybe you should know that your opinion on a script is not so important. It's not about your opinion and you need to really separate it, okay? I might read a screenplay that I might be like, I'm not sure I could go to the cinema to see this. It's not my type of movie as a spectator, but the screenplay is really professional and it's really good. And people who like this type of story might love it, okay? So it's very important to separate your personal opinion. So, okay, now that we know all this, let's start to talk about what I look for when I'm reading a screenplay, okay? And these are the aspects that you can apply to your own writing, okay? First of all, just to make clear that every script consultant has their own way of working, their own voices and vision. So I can only talk about myself. Other script consultants might look for other things, okay? So I do not work from a very specific set of rules, okay? For example, for me, events don't need to happen in a specific page, okay? For example, the inciting incident can happen in page 5 or it can happen in page 25, and that's absolutely fine. What I do is I ask a lot of questions so that I find the right answer for that specific screenplay, okay? For example, Jurassic Park, the movie, the screenplay is 143 pages long. That's 143 pages long. And the first dinosaur doesn't leave the cage until page 74. That's the midpoint of the story, okay? So if I work with a specific set of rules, I might have been like, a script consultant might have been, oh, that's too late. It needs to happen, for example, in page 40. And that could have been a terrible mistake because it was perfect that it happened on page 74. So I think as a script consultant, you need to really be willing to listen to every story and find different answers, you know, and not be too formulaic. Otherwise, I don't think you can really help the script writer. Okay, so now let's go to each area of the screenplay and what I look for. the first thing I look for is the premise. Okay, so what's at the heart of the story? And I ask myself questions as, is this story memorable enough? Am I gonna remember it after reading it? I also ask myself, is it strong enough to hold the audience attention for 2 hours? Or is it strong enough to hold the audience attention for 8 episodes, if it's a TV series, no? I also ask myself if the writer is approaching the story from the most original point of view, okay? Sometimes with a few changes, the story can be more powerful and more original. And then I look at whether the writer is exploring all the conflict possible, okay? Is the writer making it as hard as possible for the main character to achieve their goals, okay? And I want to really emphasize this point of conflict because I read a lot of screenplays that lack a lot of conflict, okay? So let's talk a little bit about this conflict. There are 3 types of conflict, okay? There's internal conflict, there's interpersonal conflict, and then there's situational or environmental conflict, okay? So in a screenplay, the most powerful it's gonna be, the more conflict you touch upon. Okay, so let's talk about an example. Imagine you're writing a story about a man, a normal man, who suddenly some criminals start going after him because they confuse him with someone else that they want to kill. Okay, it's a classic story of a mistaken identity. So this could be a situational conflict, okay? The criminals are after him, situational conflict. So then I would be like, can you add more conflict to this? Let's try to add interpersonal conflict. So imagine this man has a wife who they're in love, they have a really happy relationship, but then suddenly the wife is also starting to question this man's identity because of these criminals. Okay, so now you have also interpersonal conflict. Yeah, and now let's try to add more conflict. Let's try to add internal conflict. Imagine this man was adopted when he was a child and he has always questioned his own identity. Okay, so now you have 3 layers of conflict, and it's not completely separate random types of conflict. No, it's all about identity. So you're adding thematic layers, and that's when it's, you're starting to build a complex story about identity. Okay, and now I want to give you an actual real example. I'm going to talk about some movies. I'm sorry, I'm going to give you some spoilers. I try to choose movies that are not super new so that I don't spoil it for you. But I'm not sure if you've watched this movie called Sound of Metal. It's from 2019 by Darius Marder. And it's the story about a drummer, a musician, who suddenly loses his hearing, okay? So his loss of hearing directly contradicts his dream, okay? He could be a musician who loses his vision. It could be an interesting movie as well, but the fact that it's his hearing that he loses, it's directly contradicting his dream. So suddenly this guy who goes out every night and he goes to concerts with friends to listen to music. So suddenly he doesn't fit his environment anymore, okay? He has a number of environmental conflict. Then he has a girlfriend who's also a musician, and her dream is to become a musician. So suddenly his relationship with his girlfriend is not working anymore, okay? He has, again, interpersonal conflict because he cannot be a musician anymore and she still can. So what's gonna happen? Are they gonna still together? That's the question. And then this boy has built his identity on him being a musician, and his dreams are about playing music. So suddenly he has this interpersonal conflict in which he has no clue, he doesn't know who he is anymore. Okay, so again, 3 types of conflict. So always, when you're designing your screenplay, think about these 3 layers within the same thing, okay? And why are we talking so much about story? Everybody who teaches screenwriting are gonna say like story is conflict, no? And it's important that we don't only repeat this, no? Let's think what this means. And it's because conflict gives characters dilemmas, okay? And the only way we get to know the humanity of a character, no? The only way that we can get to know a character in a deep level is through dilemmas, okay? And now we're gonna move on, but later on when we talk about characters, we're gonna talk about dilemmas again. So yeah, we're gonna come back to this. But then after the premise, I also look at theme. Okay, theme is what the story is really about. Underneath the plot, what is it really telling me, no? For example, a theme could be fame corrupts, okay? So I try to find the theme of the story when I read the script, because I know many script writers don't think about theme. And I think it's okay. I don't think you should be obsessed with trying to find the theme of your story. It's okay if you don't know it. I think sometimes the theme gets really abstract and it might stop you from actually writing the screenplay. And I think it's sometimes until you haven't written the last draft of the screenplay that you're not like, oh, I understand now what I was talking about, you know? And that's absolutely okay. But because I know the writers don't do this work, I do it for them. Yeah, I do the job of trying to find this theme. And to find the theme, what I do, and this is something you can do if you actually want to find the theme that you're working on, is you have to look at the ending of your story. Okay, so the whole script, it's a debate on a subject. Okay, for example, if we're thinking about fame corrupts, the whole story, you might present characters who have different opinions about theme. For example, you might show us some famous person who is wealthy and super happy and they're having an incredible time because they're famous. But then you might also have a character who is really struggling because he's famous. He's using drugs to avoid pain, okay? So it's this debate. It's like, is it good? Is it bad? And then at the end, you're gonna, for example, give us a character, the main character becomes famous, but she also has lost all humanity. She has lost all her loved ones in order to become famous, and she's miserable. So it's through the main character that we can understand what you're trying to say about being famous, and it's that it corrupts, okay? So I always look at the ending of the screenplay. And what I find is that many scriptwriters have one intention, but actually say another thing. So for example, I might point out to the writer, like, your story seems to be telling this. It seems that you want to say that fame corrupts, but because you're actually have a happy ending for your character, you're actually saying the other thing wrong. You're saying that fame is good for people. Are you sure that you want to say this? You know, that's something that I might talk to the writer about. Then we have a structure, and I don't want to talk too much about structure, but just a couple of things. I do make sure that the beginning of the story really explains clearly who the protagonist is, or who the protagonists in plural are, in case it's an ensemble story. I also make sure that you're saying what problem they are facing, okay? And that we know from the beginning of the story what the nature of antagonism is. Even if we still don't know what where exactly it comes from. We need to get a sense of these forces of antagonism from the beginning, okay? Then I look at whether the core part of the story is exploring the consequences of the inciting incident. I make sure you introduce a turning point, okay, that is critical to the commitment of the character. So in other words, I make sure that in the middle of this middle part of the second act, let's say, that suddenly the commitment of the character increases. And I made sure you end in another turning point in which the stakes are risen, you know, so that the stakes and the conflict keep getting higher and higher for the main character. And then I make sure, like at the end, I ask myself, is this climax satisfying enough? Okay. And are all the plots and subplots, are they given an answer? Even if sometimes subplots end in a quite ambiguous way or in a small way, has the writer bothered to give some kind of closure to all these subplots? Then I also look at genre, or not all movies or not all screenplays have a genre, no? Some are more like types of story, let's say, if they're more author-like. And I look basically at two things about this, okay? I'm gonna look at whether the writer is following like all the important conventions of the genre, okay? Or maybe some screenplays, people are missing really important conventions or principles. And I'm like, oof, if you don't show us this, the audience is gonna be feeling a bit betrayed. They have some expectations that you're not meeting, okay? For example, I might read a thriller. Imagine if in a thriller, by the end of the story, we don't really know who the antagonist is, okay? We still don't know. There's someone following our main character, but we don't know who that person is by the end of the story. I'm gonna be like, hey, we might have a problem. You might need to clarify this point because people have expectations and they might be disappointed. And on the other side of this, I might also be like checking if you're following way too many conventions. No, I'm gonna ask like, oh, is the script too formulaic? Is the writer following every single convention to the point that the story has no life of its own? It's completely unoriginal. So I look at these two extremes when I look at genre, okay? It's very typical, it's very common to mix different genres nowadays, especially, and that's completely fine. You can find, I read sometimes like a thriller that it's also a drama and a coming of age, and it's fine to mix all these genres. But sometimes a problem that I find is that the way the writer is mixing them is a bit confusing. For example, I might read a screenplay that starts like a drama coming of age thriller, and then by the midpoint of the story, the thriller completely disappears. Okay? And in this case, I would go to the writer and I might be like, hey, this is creating some problems, some confusion about what the story is about. So have you thought on actually taking out the thriller? Maybe we can just delete it, maybe don't use the thriller elements. Or if you really want to use the thriller, why not work within the thriller genre until the end of the story? You know, so I always try to give different options, because sometimes you don't know what the writer's intentions are. Okay, then I also look at point of view, and this is a very important point. And I'm saying it's important because for some reason, writers do not tend to look at point of view. They don't think about it. And it's almost like, imagine a novelist, a person who writes novels, who doesn't decide who the narrator of the story is before they start writing the novel, okay? So it's a very important point, and writers just come to you and they're like, oof, I've never thought of the point of view of the story. So I want to talk about this a little bit, okay? before you start writing your story, you should decide through whose eyes we're seeing it. And that doesn't mean the main character. You can have a story in which you have the main character, but you're seeing the story from somebody else's point of view. Yes? And people confuse this a lot. So if your objective is to create empathy towards your main character, you need to have the main character in every single scene. Okay. If your objective is to have them empathy, to create empathy, okay, that's done a lot in dramas, for example, okay, because then the audience is gonna discover the story at the same rhythm as the protagonist, okay. They just go through the journey together. And then if your objective is to create some, let's say, if you want the audience to feel protective towards your main character, then you can give other points of view. You can have some scenes in which the main character is present, but also you can have some scenes in which the main character is not present. Okay, this is done a lot in thrillers, for example. Okay, imagine you have the main character sitting at home watching TV, and then you suddenly show us the criminals. They discover, we can see that the criminals have discovered where the main character is, and we know they're taking the car and they're going to his house. Okay, so by showing us other points of view, suddenly we're getting worried about our main character. Okay, we're protective towards them. So I find a lot of screenplays in which, for example, all the scenes are seen, the main character is present, but then suddenly at the end of the story, we have a scene in which the main character is not present, okay? This creates inconsistency of style. The audience will notice, maybe not in a conscious level, okay? Maybe it's not like, oh, what is this scene doing here? It's not like that, but at an unconscious level, they notice that there's something a bit confusing about this, okay? So in cases like this, I'm gonna tell the writer, oh, can you actually take that scene away because it's creating some confusion? Or if you don't want to take it away, can you place, for example, the protagonist there? Or can you actually, yeah. Or can you actually, if you want to have some other people's point of view, can you do it from the beginning of the story? You know, can you add 2 more scenes from that character point of view? So that from the beginning, we know we're not seeing the story always from the point of view of the main character, okay? And now let's go to talk about character. And this is a very, very important point, probably the most important point. What is character, okay? Characters should be made of a dream or of a wound, fears, a flaw, secrets, talent, okay? Because characters should be made of the same elements that humans are made of, okay? And we're complex. So all these elements I mentioned, they're all internals, no? Internal, sorry. So how do we show that to the viewer? And showing that to the audience is not easy. It's incredibly complicated. In a novel, you can say exactly what's on the character's mind. In cinema, we cannot do that. So it's really, really complicated. So I find that new writers tend to create a lot of flashbacks in the screenplays because they're like, oh, how can I explain my character's traumas and you know, all the internal conflict? I'm gonna show a flashback from when they were children, and you know, that's when the wound was created. And I'm not saying flashbacks are bad, like sometimes they're amazing, but it's a problem when that's the only way that we are able to show characters' flaws, okay? Because you can show all these like like dreams, wounds, fears, flaws, secret, and talent of the character by confronting your main characters with dilemmas. Okay, this is what we were talking before. So how can we use dilemmas on a character? Okay, so imagine you have a man who thinks really well about himself. Maybe he's a politician. He thinks he's very ethical. He's very moralistic. He's generous. You know, he cares about people, about his community, you know, and he's quite happy about himself. And then this man, one day, he's in an accident. Imagine he goes on an airplane accident, and in order to survive, he goes through some really terrible decisions, and he discovers a side of himself that he has no clue he had. For example, imagine that in order to survive, he needs to steal food from a child. Okay, they find some food, and he takes away some food from the child, and the child dies, but thanks to that, he survives. And at the end, this man goes back to his house, to his wife, and to his children. He's alive, he survived, he achieved his objective, but he knows something about himself that he didn't know at the beginning. And it's that when he's pushed under pressure, he's gonna take a child's food so that he can survive. No, he's not so moralistic, he's not so generous anymore. You know, can he go back to politics? Can he go back to his wife and children? So dilemmas, no, by putting dilemmas and pressuring your main character, you can actually show that character's humanity. Sometimes I find writers that they think the bigger arc they give to their main character, the better their story is gonna be. And I don't think it's not so much about giving big arcs to the main character, it's more about making the arc credible. In a feature script, you only have 2 hours. There's so much you can do in 2 hours, okay? So it's better to have a smaller arc, but that we can believe it, than to try to change some, I don't know, from being super rude, selfish person to the happiest person in the planet. Sometimes it's not possible. So make the arc credible, even if it's smaller. And then something very important, there's a difference between choices and dilemmas, and writers tend to confuse the both a lot. Choice are options, okay? Like your character may have to decide whether to go to work to New York or London. That's choices. Dilemmas, it's about choosing between 2 undesirable options. So you give the character 2 options and they're both really bad, but you force the character to choose, okay? And the best example to show you this is a movie named Sophie's Choice. It's the most famous example. I'm gonna spoil it again if you haven't watched it, but it's a movie about Sophie is sent to Auschwitz, a concentration camp, during the Nazi occupation in Poland. And he has 2 children. He has a boy and a girl. And the guard asks her to choose which of his children should be kept alive and which of her children should be sent to the gas chamber. Okay, so she has to choose one of her children to die. It's an absolutely impossible decision to make, okay? It doesn't get worse than this. It's the most impossible decision to make. But she needs to take that decision, okay? Because if she doesn't, they're gonna take away both of her children and they're both gonna die. Okay, so this is the most famous dilemma within the script writing world. And you can keep this in mind every time that we're thinking about dilemmas. They don't need to be this terrible, but it needs to be between these 2 impossible decisions. Okay, then we also have secondary characters. They are great to create subplots that complicate the journey for the main character. And you can also use secondary characters to add theme, okay? For example, if your theme is about love, finding love, you might add secondary characters that are divorcing, breaking up, or on the contrary, they deciding they want to be single, they're embracing being single. So with all this, you're creating more complex theme. Okay, then we go to dialogue. Some writers are fantastic at writing dialogue, but they have more problems designing their story, okay? While some other writers, they can really design a story, they can really write descriptions, but when it comes to writing dialogue, it's like, this could be much better, okay? So I'm gonna give you some clues on how you can think about improving your dialogue, if this is your case. So if you think dialogue is not your strongest point, I would say instead of being like, I'm not really good at dialogue, I'm just gonna work more on the story. No, if you're not good on dialogue, put double attention into it, no? Double your work on dialogue. Like just reread your script, only working on the dialogues, only reading the dialogues. I advise you to read screenplays, okay? Just download screenplays online, analyze how other writers write screenplays, you know, how professional writers do it. Always remember to add subtext to your writing, which is the gap between what the character is actually feeling and what they're actually saying. They're lying to themselves, you know. And when the audience notices, like, oh, what they're saying, it's not true. They're lying to themselves. That's really nice. So try to add a few moments of subtext during your story. Give each character a different voice. I'm sure in every country, depending on which region of the country, like people have different accents. Some people are really articulate. Some other people might bumble a lot, you know. So try to give each of your character different voices. Maybe read the script aloud and record yourself and then listen back to your dialogue. Sometimes when we hear it, it's like, oh, this doesn't work, you know. And also, if worse comes to worse and your dialogue is not great, you can always try to find a co-writer, you know. Be honest with yourself, be like, I have an amazing story, but the dialogues there's something wrong with it. Just find another co-writer who's amazing at dialogues and, you know, collaborate. And also, if you write a voiceover, I would advise you to write the story without it. Make sure the story is understood without the voiceover. And when you're sure that people understand the story, then you can add it just to add some style to your story, okay? And then you can add humor and tension through the voiceover, but don't use it to explain the story, okay? I'm brushing here a little bit because we only have 10 more minutes, but try not to write camera directions in your script. Your job as a writer is to suggest through the words that you use, suggest not using camera directions, okay? Because your job is to involve the reader into the fictional world of the story. Once you put a camera direction, like zoom in, you take me away from that fictional world. You take me back to reality, and you don't want to do that, okay? Also, even if you're a director, you might not end up writing that story, okay? So it's better not to give camera directions. Also, when you write flashbacks, remember they're always more powerful when they're subjective instead of objective. But by that, I mean, it's important that we know who is thinking about that past, okay? If I know that flashback comes from the mind of the mother of the main character, I know I'm watching the past from her point of view. But when we have an objective flashback that we don't have any idea who's thinking about that past, then it becomes exposition. Okay? It becomes just information, and that's not so good. And then you might also use montages, which are great. They advance the story very quickly, but you need to remember that they're really expensive. So when I see a screenplay with a lot of montages, I tell writers, like, it's great, but remember that it increases the budget for your story. Okay, then, okay, imagine you receive, you have a script consultancy with me or with a script consultant, or you read a script report. What do you do with its feedback? No, first of all, don't rush, let it rest, let it sink in. And it's your job as a writer to filter all the feedback and to use it as like a creative fuel to make your story better, okay? Not all feedback will be useful to you, okay? Sometimes I might say some comments to a writer that they're gonna be like, this is not useful to me. That's okay. It would be impossible for you to take every feedback in. You need to filter, but also try to think what's best for your story, not your ego, okay? It's important. Always think best for the story. Sometimes you will not like some comments, but if everybody's saying the same thing, listen to that. Maybe they're right on what they're saying, okay? And also be brave, take risks when you rewrite the story. I find writers sometimes send you a new draft, and it's almost the same as the last draft that you read. And it's like the writer thinks they change a lot, but they haven't actually changed that much. So you can always go back to a previous draft. But it's your time, when you're writing, it's your time to risk and experiment and push the story to the maximum. And then if you've gone too far, you can always go back. Okay, so be brave and take risks. And also, I want to point out it's very important nowadays to really make sure that you can explain why you're the best writer for that story. Okay, because producers more and more, they're gonna be like, why are you telling this story? You know, they don't not always buy your story, they also are buying you as a person. You know, why are you the best person to tell this story? And I want to show you an example. And there's this TV series which is called I May Destroy You. It's by Michaela Cole. And this writer went to Netflix to sell the story, and Netflix were really interested, and they were like, we want to buy it, but we don't want you. We want the story, but we want you away. And they were willing to pay her a lot of money. And this TV series, it's about a girl who was drugged and then she was raped. And she's a writer who lives in London, and she travels to Italy for work. So, okay. And this writer had been drugged and raped, and she's a writer, and she lives in London, and she goes to Italy to work. So it was her story. And Netflix still didn't want her. For some reason, they didn't trust her. So luckily, she didn't accept their proposal, and then HBO bought the story, and they did want her, and this was made. And I'm sure that Netflix really regrets their decision. But I'm using this example to say that sometimes production companies will want to take you away from the story, and maybe you're happy with that, and that's not a problem. But if you want to continue with your story, you're gonna need to make an effort to really find what connects you to the story and make sure that you can defend that, and you can be like, hey, you won me in this project because nobody's gonna tell the story better than I can. Okay, and that's it. ¿Cómo se llama la serie? I'll write it down. I'll repeat it. It's called I May Destroy You. Okay, but I'm gonna write it down later on the chat. And then basically, I want just to finish by saying writing is rewriting. Okay, I find many writers, they rush to finish a draft and they send it to you. But you have to understand that producers, directors, script consultants will read a lot of screenplays, and we get tired, you know. So when we take, I don't know, a really long screenplay, really badly written, you're making it more difficult to yourself to seduce, like really polish your writing. You know, when you finish a draft, then rewrite it and just leave it for a whole week, don't read it and go back to it with fresh eyes, you know. Sometimes the magic and the beauty happens when you start understanding your story, and that takes time. Sometimes it takes months for you to be like, oh, now I'm starting to connect the dots and I understand what I'm saying. So give yourself time. Also, read a lot of screenplays. I find a lot of writers who do not read screenplays. We all watch movies. We all watch TV series, you know. Engineers watch movies and they're not writers, you know. It doesn't make you a better writer to watch movies. What makes you a better writer is to read screenplays. If you're here today, it means you understand English. So there's so many screenplays in English, you know. In Spanish not so much, in your language first not so much, but in English there are lots online. You can find PDF and just try, say, I'm gonna read one screenplay a week. It takes 2 hours to read a screenplay and it's gonna make your writing so much better. I always see the difference between writers who read and writers who don't. And then to end this, I always end my classes saying that please, there's this talk in YouTube that I strongly recommend. I feel like every writer should watch this video. It's by Charlie Kaufman. I'm also gonna write it in the chat. It's BAFTA Guru, and it's Charlie Kaufman, who is a writer and director from the US, and he gives a talk about script writing. And I think you're gonna love it. And yeah, every writer should really watch this talk. Okay, but that's it for me. Like, ask any questions. I'm really happy to chat now. And I'm gonna write these 2 things in the chat. Okay.
Okay, Miss Blanca, thank you very much. To all the participants, if any of you have any questions, you can type them directly on our chat box. You can ask both in Bahasa Indonesia and English. And if you type in Bahasa, I will help to translate it. You may ask your questions now. Yes. Open your mic and ask directly to Miss Blanca.
Hola Blanca, ¿qué tal?
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Bueno, pues muy interesante y me llama mucho la atención. Y, y por cierto, perdón que te hago esta pregunta en castellano, ¿vale? Pero hablas castellano, ¿no?
Claro, sí.
Vale, pues es una pregunta bastante personal. Bueno, yo últimamente estudié en Madrid y en un instituto, se llama Instituto del Cine. Bueno, no es muy conocido. Y bueno, he intentado estos últimos meses, ¿vale? Para escribir un guión. Y bueno, quizá es una pregunta tonta, yo diría, o quizá se preguntaría a un guionista, ¿no? Pero bueno, tengo esta duda que si te enfrentas a una diferencia cultural, porque yo cuando estudiaba en Madrid me cuesta muchísimo para escribir un guión, porque hay como un enfrentamiento cultural. Es decir, quizá, pues un ejemplo más obvio, ¿vale? Que aquí, para los jóvenes, tener sexo antes de matrimonio es como una cosa que mala vista, mientras ahí en España es como muy común, ¿no?
¿El qué de un matrimonio, perdona?
El de tener sexo antes de matrimonio.
Ah.
¿Vale? Y bueno, hay más conflictos, o sea, diferencias culturales. Y quizá tiene algunas sugerencias si yo quisiera escribir un guión y con ese problema que tengo.
Claro. Vale, and should I answer in English, no? I imagine.
Yes, Blanca, you can answer in English.
Sí. So he's asking about the cultural differences, no? So it's like, for example, you can have a story about having sex before marriage, and in Spain it's completely fine. People are not going to have a problem with that. And in other countries they might be like, wow, this is really problematic, and it's going to be really, really problematic. So how do you deal with this? I think you should write the story that you're more excited about writing, and but of course you need to know who you are talking to, no? So for example, you should be like, okay, I want my story to be international. So even if this is gonna be very problematic in my own country, I want to send it to festivals, and I want I don't know, I want it to travel everywhere in the world. So I don't care if it's problematic in my own country, because, for example, I think sex before marriage is fine. So I'm just gonna write this story, and that's a commitment that you make. Yeah, it's like, but you need to be aware it's gonna be problematic, and I think that's fine, because also, yeah, and you might make a movie and where the characters behave in a way that in other countries they would think this is strange, for example, or in some countries homosexuality is not well seen, but you might, I don't know, it's how you show it. You need to make a commitment at some point on who your audience is. And as long as you explain the story in universal ways, people are going to connect and the story is going to travel. Okay. But yeah, it's a complicated issue.
Yeah, bueno, muchas gracias, Blanca.
Bueno, a ti.
Okay, we have time for another question. So if there are anyone who wants to ask a question to Miss Blanca, you can directly send it to the chat box, or you can directly open your mic and speak up. You can ask.
I can see a question here. How to sell my script to the production companies, because it's very hard to reach them. Please tell us step by step, because commonly the production companies only take the script from novel writer or some platform like Wattpad. Yeah, it's definitely not easy. There are different ways that you can do it. For example, one thing I recommend is for you to go to events or film festivals, for example. If you keep going to film festivals, you're gonna meet people. Maybe you meet a producer and you can say, and they're gonna give you their card, and then you can write to them and say, hi, never send you screenplay directly, but be like, hey, so I have this story, and you can write the logline, which is one line about what the story is about. Like, I have a horror movie about this subject. Would you like to read the synopsis, for example? Okay. And then they might be like, yes, send me the synopsis. Then you can send the synopsis. And if they like it, then you can say, and now can I send the screenplay? Okay, so one way would be for you to be really active in going to events, to go to film festivals. Another way you can do this is by going, there's Blacklist, for example. It's a platform. You need to pay a little bit. It's a US platform. It has to be in English, probably, the screenplay. In Spain, we have a company that I work for, and it's called Film Market. Okay, and they do accept screenplays in English, so you can go to them as well. And you can also you can look online for production companies in your country, or maybe also outside, depending on what story you have. Check companies that usually produce films that are the same genre that your script is. And then you can write to them, and I know what you're saying. It's like they're gonna be like, we don't take screenplays. No, I'm sure you find that problem, but be like, I'm a new writer and I have this story, and just write the logline of the story and see what happens. I know it's complicated and maybe 80% are gonna be like, we don't read screenplays, but still that shouldn't stop you from doing it. And maybe you find 2 that are gonna be like, oh, maybe I'm interested. Yeah, that's the best I can say. It's a very complicated process to have the first one. And also like work with short films. Yeah, how do you know if the script is not common? I mean, so many stories that have been produced, and as a filmmaker, to know the story will win a pitching process. You will not know. You don't know if your story will win a pitching process, because especially it's not only about the idea being original. It's also if they like you, and when I say like you, I mean if there's something about you that they see some passion, that they believe you. It doesn't mean that you have to be really funny or really extroverted. It just means that they see passion in you, or they think, wow, this story, it's so personal, this person is so brave, you know. But you cannot know if they're gonna like it. The best you can do is to be as prepared as possible, do the work, okay? And you're gonna go to 10 pitchings and nobody's gonna like your story. And then on the 11th, they're gonna be like, yeah, I like it. Okay. Yeah, you can never know. I think we tend to know if a story is original, okay? But it's not only about the story being original. Sometimes I've read screenplays of really simple stories, and they're absolutely beautiful, and they end up being made because they're maybe cheap, they're beautifully written, they're honest. You know, it's not only about having the most new ever original story. You know, you can also write small films and they might work. And there's a lot of producers that are looking for small stories, small human stories, just communicated with a lot of enthusiasm. Is there another question? Sorry, I didn't see it.
Yes.
So the key is growing the connection, right? But is there any agency who can help the script writers to sell the script to the production companies? So there are agents, script agents and script managers. I know in Spain there are not that many. I don't know how it is in Indonesia, I have no idea, but look it up. I imagine it must be like in Spain, maybe you have some agents and managers, but not many, okay? Sometimes you can try to find one abroad, maybe in the US or in the UK, but it might be difficult. Maybe if you've written a novel, but it's gonna be difficult, okay? But these platforms like Blacklist or Film Market, they act a little bit like agents. And yeah, and maybe you can, like, the most simple way I would say is try to meet people from the industry, okay? Maybe you studied with other people, so you have friends who work in the industry. You go to film festival and you are all in the same level, okay? Maybe you know actors and directors who are also starting. Instead of being like, oh, I want to know the people on the top, sometimes it's okay to know people at your same level, like create strong connections and be like, hey, try to talk about me if you know someone who's looking for script writers. And I'm gonna talk about you if I know someone who's looking for a director or from an actor. So you can act as agents between yourselves, yeah? And you can help each other a lot in that sense. So it's not, I'm sure you have more connections that you actually think. It's just that maybe you're valuing only the top ones when it's okay for people who are on your same level. Yeah.
Okay, we can allow one more question if there's still anyone who wants to ask the question to Miss Blanca.
Hola, bueno, soy yo de nuevo.
Okay.
Y solo quería decirle que es un placer conocerle y me gustaría si... por cierto, ¿vive en Barcelona?
Yes, I live in Barcelona. Yeah.
Wow, pues me gustaría poder encontrar con usted, de verdad, porque no estoy seguro, es que este diciembre creo que regresaré a Barcelona, a SCAC, si conoces.
Where?
SCAC, la
Scout.
escuela, sí.
Oh, sí, sí, tanto que lo conozco. Ah, muy bien, felicidades.
Bueno, y no sé, me gustaría si algún día podemos encontrarnos, de verdad.
Bueno, me puedes encontrar online. Si quieres, escríbeme cuando estés aquí.
Ah, sí, sí.
Pues me puedes encontrar a través de la web.
Vale, ¿y cuál es su web, porfa? ¿Me podrías...?
www.decodingstories.com. Te lo escribo por
Decoding?
el chat.
Sí, sí, mejor, porfa.
Sí. So I'm gonna send you my web page, but I'm gonna answer this question first. What if in the script you have to explain the symbols that became a semiotic but still have a strong meaning for the film? Because I think there will be some shifts that might make the meaning weak or strong. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean. You mean you create some symbols, and then if you need to explain them, is that what you mean, Selvira?
Yeah, I'm sorry I cannot open my camera because in here is rainy, so the signal is so bad.
So
You can hear my
I can
sound?
hear you perfectly.
All
Yeah.
right. All right. I'm sorry I didn't see the last message if cannot to ask more, but I interest about symbol or semiotic on the script because maybe we can talk about semiotic like a bird or something, semiotic for a human like that, and we can translate that in the script, but we see in screenplay, we just I think I have some problem if that meaning is become weak or stronger. Like I would to say that the beautiful of bird is like the beautiful or for girl or for man, but maybe I can explain as much as like this in the script. So I just want to ask if the semiotic for the script is can explain or shift to screenplay is must be sorry, how to explain that about the semiotic to the script.
Yeah, I think I understand understand what you mean. So you create a symbol for your story. Imagine we have a bird, okay, and
Yeah.
we keep seeing a bird throughout the story, no? And you want to fill this bird with meaning. You want the reader be like, oh, I've seen this bird before in the story, and she might mean it's, I don't know, the character. It represents the character or some kind of meaning, right? You mean
Yeah, that's right.
how do you build
Yeah,
that meaning?
the
So
meaning is become a bold like not a weak meaning because the semiotic is I don't know, I have seen some semiotic is become weak meanings or become stronger meanings.
yeah, so you don't need to explain so much. If like we keep seeing a bird throughout the story, as a reader, I'm gonna be like, wow, like birds are important. I understand this has become a meaning. And you have to leave space to the reader to be like, I think she means this with the bird, okay? Like for example, freedom. Every time I see the bird, she tries to represent freedom. And you need to leave space to the reader to guess what it is. So you don't need to tell the reader what it is, okay? Is that what you meant?
Yeah,
In the
yeah. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay. So you don't need to be like, you don't need to write in the description like every time you see a bird, it's because I try to say, it's a symbol of freedom. You don't need to say that because that's going to be impossible to film. It's not, it's going to be impossible to translate into the, when it's a movie. But we're smart enough to be like, wow, this bird has appeared many times in the story, and I get a sense that the writer wants me to understand it's about freedom, no? Something like that. I don't know if it answers your question. I hope it does.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
my question. Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you, Bianca.
Fantastic. Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Blanca. Okay, yeah. This is another question from Shakina Ashari.
Okay, there is some university who holding summer class for scriptwriting like Oxford and UCL. If we attend that summer class, is there a higher chance of getting connections and selling our scripts? Okay, good question. It's always interesting, no? Should I invest in studying or should I not? And I think studying is great because it puts you in touch with people who are starting out with you. You're gonna make friends, you're gonna make connections. It's impossible not to, or you're gonna end up meeting people, and it's really important to be connected as a scriptwriter. So I would be like, yeah, it's important. However, it's also usually quite expensive. Yeah, so it also depends on your economy. It's like, should I make this effort? If you can afford it, it's fantastic, you go to a really important university and it's going to be good for your CV and you're going to make connections. But also don't think, if it's a big effort to pay for that, don't think it's going to change your life also. Like, it's also important to write. If you're really committed to writing, you can write from your own home. So don't feel that if you cannot afford a really big university or they don't actually give you a place, don't feel like, wow, I'm not going to be able to be a scriptwriter. No, because you can also write in your free time and then move your stories and try to make connections some other way. But going to film festivals, sometimes you have to pay. Well, you usually have to pay. So it's also money. Going to universities is also money. And it's true that like a short course, summer course, sometimes will give you connections. If it's an online course, maybe it's not the same as if you go actually in person. But yeah, everything that increases your chances on meeting people, it's gonna be good for you. And not only scriptwriters, like get in touch with directors. If you're finding it hard to actually talk to producers, I would say like try to write to directors. Maybe they're going to be more open to talking to you. Maybe you can be like, hey, I've written this screenplay and I'm looking for someone to help me get it made. You're a director. I've seen some of your short films. Are you looking for a feature length script? Because here I am. I have a feature length completed that if you want to direct, I want you to direct it. So that's another option. Or go to actors. Actors sometimes are desperate to find material. They're gonna be like, if you can say like, do you want to read my screenplay? And if you like it, you can show it to people that you know. So there are different roads to making connections.
Okay, thank you, Blanca. So, is there any other participant who want to ask a question to Miss Blanca? You can ask in Bahasa if you're not comfortable asking in English, and I will help translate your question. Okay, Blanca. So, final question from me. So, I am a fellow moviegoer, so I love to watch TV series and movies as well. And I enjoy some TV series from Spain, like Money Heist, and I watched this show called Elite, if you know.
Yeah, I haven't seen it though.
So, yeah, yeah, both are in Netflix right now. So the question I want to ask you is, how do you keep a TV series or TV show interesting for almost all of the seasons that they have? Because in my experience with Money Heist and Elite, both of those shows are, you know, essentially downgrading as the season passes. So that's my
Okay,
question. Thank you.
yeah. Sorry, the second TV series that you talked about, is it Merli or Elite?
Elite. Elite.
Elite. Okay. So
Yes.
that's the problem with TV series, no? That they suddenly at the beginning they're like, wow, this is incredible, and suddenly they start. And the problem is that they still have viewers, so they're making money, so they don't want to end it, but it's going, the quality is going down, because maybe like the first premise that the writers had, the idea they had, they already explored it. Like at the beginning, I was saying, one of the questions I asked myself is this story strong enough to hold a whole season? But I never asked, like, I'm not like, is this strong enough to hold an 8 seasons? 8 seasons, it's crazy. Like, who can do that, no? And you have like maybe Breaking Bad, for example, they did it really well. No, there are TV series that they managed to do it, but it's usually because they had an incredibly complex main character. Okay, Money Heist, they don't have that many. Like, it's really, the plot is crazy, and it really hooks you, but the characters are not that complex. And I feel like the ones that are like Sopranos, there are all these TV series that it's like, wow, this could keep going, and they knew when to end it. They had a really interesting character with many layers, many layers. Like, it's almost like Shakespeare, no? And then they knew when to end it. And I think it's about planning, maybe 2 seasons before, like, okay, we're gonna do 2 more. We're starting to close down the TV series, no? And because then you can feel the whole thing, it's really rushed. But it's basically a problem that they want to keep making money from the TV series, and writers are exhausted, the creator is exhausted, and they're losing the plot. But sometimes you have one TV series one season that goes bad, and then they go back to doing it well. Like Stranger Things, there was a TV series, a season that was like, what's happening? This is going really bad. And sometimes they know, they realize they made some mistakes, and they learn from it, and then they can keep making it better.
Okay. Thank you so much, Blanca, for answering my questions and all of the questions from the participant. It's almost 15:30 here in Jakarta, so it's time for the closing of today's workshop. So thank you so much, Miss Blanca, for today's workshop. It has been a lot of fun and very insightful. Hopefully, this workshop will help all of us in developing our script writing skill in the future. Thank you also for all the participants for all your enthusiasm in this workshop. So before we end this class, I would also like to remind you, as I have typed in the chat box before, so Blanca will be going live with us on June 9th, on 9 Juni, hari Kamis, on Thursday 9th June, on 16:30 on Jakarta time. So Blanca will join us on the Instagram live, so you can ask further questions on the Instagram live. And I would also like to remind the selected participants for the second day of the workshop that this workshop will be held for one more day from 2 to 5 p.m. Jakarta time with the link that we already sent to you via email. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Blanca. Thank you for all
Thank
the
you.
participants for joining us today. So see you on the next event. Thank you.
So thank you.
Mm.